the special chair. Maria smoothed the lapels of her crisp blazer, a subtle confidence rippling through her as she approached the mahogany doors of the main conference room. The hum of anticipation in the air was almost palpable. This meeting, the final presentation for the new Community Outreach Initiative, represented months of tireless effort from her team. She pushed the doors open, a faint scent of polished wood and fresh coffee greeting her. Sunlight streamed in through the tall windows, illuminating the long, gleaming table. Her gaze swept across the room, noting the familiar faces of her senior project managers already settling in. Then, her eyes landed on the head of the table. There, in her chair, the one with the slightly wider armrest and the small, brass plaque discreetly embedded in the back, proclaiming E. Rodriguez, CEO, sat a woman she didn't recognize. The woman was fair-skinned, with a cascade of sandy blonde hair framing a cheerful, open face. She was already deep in conversation with David, Maria's head of marketing, gesticulating animatedly as she spoke. A bright pink scarf was draped over the back of the chair, a splash of unexpected color against the muted corporate tones. Maria paused, a flicker of surprise passing through her. It wasn't the chair itself that mattered, not really. It was the principle, the unspoken understanding of hierarchy and respect that usually govern these spaces. The chair wasn't just a seat, it was a symbol, a designated space for leadership. She felt a prickle of unease, a slight disquiet that disrupted her earlier composure. The woman, sensing her presence, looked up, her blue eyes widening slightly before crinkling into a warm smile. "Oh, hello there," she chirped, her voice surprisingly robust. "Come on in, don't just stand in the doorway. Plenty of space for everyone." She gestured vaguely to the empty seats around the table, seemingly oblivious to the significance of her current perch. Maria offered a polite, if slightly strained, smile in return. The situation was odd, certainly, but she was Maria Elena Rodriguez. She wouldn't let a misplaced seat derail an important meeting. She simply had to figure out what was going on. A polite request. Maria surveyed the bustling conference room, a slight frown creasing her brow. Her gaze settled on the large, ornate chair at the head of the table, the one she'd specifically requested for this crucial quarterly review. And in it, radiating an almost startling cheerfulness, was Sarah Jenkins. Maria took a deep breath, smoothing the fabric of her skirt. Conflict was something she generally avoided, preferring collaboration, but this was her first major presentation as CEO. This was her seat. She approached the table, a polite, practiced smile gracing her lips. The room's low hum of pre-meeting chatter seemed to falter slightly as she drew near. Sarah looked up, her own smile widening, a genuine warmth in her blue eyes. "Good morning," Sarah chirped, completely at ease. Maria's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Good morning, Sarah," she replied, her voice soft but clear. She gestured subtly towards the chair. "Excuse me, I think you're in my seat." Sarah's laughter, a bright, unrestrained sound, filled the space for a moment. "Oh, I think I'm right where I need to be," she said, her eyes twinkling with a playful glint. She patted the armrest with a sense of proprietorship that made Maria's stomach clench. Sarah seemed completely oblivious to the subtle shift in the room's atmosphere, to the expectant glances that now flickered between the two women. She even leaned back a little, crossing her legs, a picture of confident repose. Maria felt a flush creep up her neck. The carefully constructed politeness she'd intended to employ now felt like a fragile shield, deflecting nothing. Sarah's casual assertion, delivered with such an open, friendly demeanor, somehow left Maria feeling awkward, as if she were the one making an unreasonable demand. The words she'd planned to use, explaining the room's layout, the significance of the head chair for the presentation, suddenly felt clunky, overly formal, and utterly unheard. Sarah just continued to smile, a picture of geniality, completely unaware she was presiding over Maria's rising internal tempest. A smaller seat. Maria's breath hitched, a wave of heat blooming across her cheeks. The polished mahogany surface of the conference table, usually a symbol of opportunity, now felt like a spotlight on her predicament. Her designated seat, the one with the subtle, engraved nameplate, was undeniably occupied. Sarah, oblivious, was already making herself comfortable, her bright smile fixed on a document. A prickle of indignation began to rise, quickly followed by the familiar, almost ingrained, urge to smooth things over. A scene would be unproductive, unprofessional. This wasn't the hill to die on, not now, not before the quarterly review even began. Her gaze swept the room, searching for an alternative. Most chairs were taken, or clearly positioned for specific roles. Then, in a corner, slightly out of the main flow, she spotted it, a smaller, less imposing chair, usually reserved for note-takers or observers. It was an almost imperceptible downgrade, yet it felt like a visible demotion. The quiet hum of conversation in the room seemed to amplify her internal struggle. "Everything all right, Maria?" Sarah's voice, cheerful and unburdened, cut through the air. Maria managed a tight smile, her jaw tensing. "Perfectly, Sarah. Just grabbing a different perspective today." The words felt stiff, foreign. She walked towards the smaller chair, her heels clicking softly on the carpet, each step a small concession. As she settled into the less plush seat, the edge of the table felt miles away, and the documents she'd brought seemed to shrink in significance. The injustice of it, though small, settled heavy in her stomach, a quiet promise to herself that this wouldn't be overlooked again. The meeting begins. The hum of the projector filled the room, a low counterpoint to the rustle of papers and the soft clicks of pens. Mr. Henderson, a man whose voice seemed perpetually set to serious business, began his presentation on quarterly budget allocations. His words, a meticulous stream of figures and forecasts, washed over Maria. She nodded at appropriate junctures, even managed a thoughtful frown when a projected deficit was displayed, but her focus was a freight tread, constantly slipping. Her gaze, against her will, kept sliding to the end of the long mahogany table. The special chair, an ergonomic marvel custom-fitted for her chronic back pain, sat occupied. Not by her, but by Sarah Jenkins, who now leaned slightly forward, seemingly engrossed in Henderson's slides. Sarah's bright floral scarf, a splash of unexpected color in the otherwise muted boardroom, seemed to mock Maria's disciplined neutrality. Maria tried to anchor herself, to force her mind back to the spreadsheet flickering on the screen. She mentally repeated Henderson's last sentence, a projected 3.7% increase in operational costs by Q3. She even made a note in her pad, a testament to her professional resolve. Yet, the image of her chair, its familiar contours now cradling someone else, pulled at her. It wasn't just a physical displacement, it was a subtle, unsettling disruption to her routine, her order. A faint clinking sound from the far end of the table, Sarah shifting a glass of water, made Maria's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. It was a minor transgression, a tiny ripple in the placid surface of the meeting, but it felt amplified. Sarah seemed perfectly comfortable, oblivious to the silent disquiet she'd inadvertently stirred. Maria knew it was irrational, childish even, to dwell on a chair, but a persistent prickle of unease caught in her stomach. Something felt off. The meeting continued, a relentless march through projections and plans, but Maria's thoughts remained snagged, like a loose thread, on the unoccupied seat. Ideas and strange looks. Maria stood at the head of the conference table, her presentation flowing with an effortless grace that belied the weeks of meticulous preparation. Her voice, clear and resonant, filled the room, outlining strategies for market penetration and community engagement. She spoke of leveraging local partnerships, of creating a feedback loop that truly amplified resident voices, and of sustainable growth that prioritized the well-being of the city's diverse population. Each slide transitioned smoothly, a testament to her command of the material and her unwavering belief in the vision she was articulating. From Maria's customary chair, Sarah watched, a curious blend of expressions playing across her face. Initially, she offered a series of affirming nods, her eyes fixed on Maria, a faint, approving smile tugging at the corners of her lips. She seemed genuinely impressed, occasionally even mouthing a silent yes as Maria hit a particularly salient point about economic empowerment zones. But then, as Maria delved into the specifics of budget allocation and proposed an innovative mentorship program for aspiring entrepreneurs, Sarah's expression shifted. Her brow furrowed ever so slightly, and her gaze hardened, though not with malice. It was a look Maria couldn't quite decipher, a mixture of intense scrutiny and something akin to bewilderment. Sarah's head tilted, just barely, as if reevaluating everything she was hearing, or perhaps, everything she thought she knew. The air in the room, previously charged with Maria's confident energy, now held a faint, almost imperceptible tremor of uncertainty, a quiet tension that rippled outward from Sarah's unreadable eyes. Maria, ever perceptive, felt the subtle change, a prickle of unease brushing against her composure. She met Sarah's gaze for a fleeting second, searching for an explanation, but found none. Sarah merely blinked, her expression remaining an enigma. Maria continued, her professionalism unwavering, but the strange looks lingered in her periphery, a silent question mark hanging over her meticulously crafted ideas. A surprising compliment. The clatter of chairs and the low murmur of voices signaled the end of the quarterly strategy session. Maria Elena, still processing a particularly thorny point about market penetration in the southern region, began stacking her presentation notes with methodical precision. The hum of the fluorescent lights seemed to dim as the room emptied, leaving behind a faint scent of stale coffee and a lingering air of productive exhaustion. She smoothed a stray strand of hair behind her ear, already mentally drafting an email to her team. As she reached for her tablet, a shadow fell across her desk. Maria looked up to see Sarah Jenkins standing beside her, a genuinely pleasant smile gracing her features. It wasn't the polite, corporate smile Maria often encountered, but one that reached her eyes, crinkling the corners. Maria offered a small, polite nod, expecting a quick farewell or perhaps a question about the next logistical step. "You know," Sarah began, her voice a warm, unexpected contralto that cut through the quiet, "You're very good at your job, Maria Elena." The words hung in the air, catching Maria completely off guard. Her hand, which had been resting on her tablet, paused midair. Compliments, especially unsolicited ones from new colleagues, were rare in her experience, and this one felt particularly direct, almost disarming. She felt a faint flush rise to her cheeks, the warmth spreading despite the cool air conditioning. "Thank you," Maria managed, the words feeling a little inadequate. She met Sarah's gaze, searching for a hidden agenda, a subtle critique, but found only sincerity. A strange, unfamiliar warmth settled in her chest, a flicker of connection she hadn't anticipated. "Leo's mom." Maria's polite smile faltered. The woman, Sarah, had just finished a charming, if slightly rambling, anecdote about her son's latest triumph in a local chess tournament. The air, thick with the scent of brewing coffee and Maria's own mounting confusion, felt suddenly heavier. "Your son?" Maria asked, the words feeling stiff on her tongue. Her brow furrowed, a faint line appearing between her dark, expressive eyes. The conversation had veered sharply from the polite pleasantries Maria was accustomed to during these initial meet-and-greet sessions. Sarah, however, seemed entirely unfazed by Maria's sudden stiffness. She simply beamed, a genuine warmth radiating from her, as if sharing this detail was the most natural thing in the world. "Yes, little Leo. He works for you, doesn't he?" she chirped, a small, knowing glint in her eyes. Her head tilted slightly, a stray strand of blonde hair falling across her cheek. Maria blinked. Once. Twice. The clatter of a distant teacup seemed to echo in the sudden silence of her mind. Leo. Leo. The name, familiar and respected, resonated with an almost physical thud. Her fantastic employee, the quiet genius with the innovative ideas, the one who always went the extra mile, the one she'd mentally earmarked for accelerated promotion. Her eyes widened, a dawning realization spreading across her features like a sunrise. The easy smile that had been a polite mask moments before now became genuine, albeit laced with a touch of astonishment. The pieces clicked into place with a startling clarity. The faint resemblance around the eyes, the similar thoughtful pauses before speaking, the shared love for meticulously organized paperwork Maria now recognized as a familial trait. A quiet laugh bubbled up from deep within her, an unexpected release of tension. Sarah, oblivious to the internal earthquake she'd just caused, simply offered a small, patient smile, waiting for Maria to catch up. The dynamic in the room had irrevocably shifted. A simple mistake. The silence in the small office stretched, thick and almost palpable. Maria, her arms still crossed, watched Sarah's face, searching for any hint of defiance or understanding. Sarah, however, looked genuinely puzzled, her brow furrowed in a way that suggested more confusion than challenge. I don't understand," Sarah began, a slight flush creeping up her neck. "Is something wrong with the chair?" "It's very comfortable." She gestured vaguely towards the plush, ergonomic seat. Maria let out a slow breath, the carefully constructed calm she'd maintained starting to fray. "Sarah, that chair, it's my chair. The CEO's chair, specifically." She tried to keep her voice even, but a hint of exasperation bled through. A startled gasp escaped Sarah. Her eyes widened, darting from Maria to the chair and back again. Then, a slow, dawning comprehension spread across her features, followed by a sudden burst of laughter. It was a rich, unrestrained sound that filled the small space, taking Maria completely by surprise. "Oh, my goodness." Sarah finally managed, wiping a tear from the corner of her eye. "He told me you were the boss, but I didn't know you were the boss. I thought I was just taking a good seat." Another peal of laughter bubbled up, genuinely amused at her own blunder. "I just saw the big desk and the comfy chair and thought, well, someone's got a good spot." Maria felt a wave of relief wash over her, followed by an intense flush of mortification. All her anxieties, her carefully constructed theories about Sarah's motivations, evaporated in an instant. The perceived challenge, the perceived disrespect, it had all been a figment of her own stressed imagination. Sarah's infectious giggles were impossible to resist. A small chuckle escaped Maria, then another, until she too was laughing, the tension in her shoulders melting away. The absurdity of it all was overwhelming. She had imagined a power struggle, and it had simply been a mistaken assumption about office furniture. The best boss. The rich, dark scent of brewing coffee permeated the expensive office. Maria, a familiar tightness gripping her shoulders, straightened her blouse. Sarah, perched casually on the executive chair, seemed oblivious, her bright eyes devouring a document. "You know, I admit I was a bit apprehensive about this transition," Sarah began, a playful spark in her gaze. Quite the legacy to uphold, wouldn't you say? She paused, then leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial murmur. Leo told me you were simply the best boss. He said you have a knack for making everyone feel valued. Maria felt a flush creep up her neck. Leo's unvarnished words, devoid of corporate pretense, struck a deep chord. It was a simple commendation, yet it resonated profoundly, a quiet validation of her core belief in nurturing her team. The tension in her shoulders dissipated, replaced by a subtle, warm current. Sarah, sensing a shift, though perhaps not grasping its full import, sprang from the plush chair. "Here," she announced, her voice clear and decisive, gesturing to the seat with an open hand. "This is your domain now. You've earned it." Her smile was genuine, wide, and utterly devoid of artifice. Maria, momentarily taken aback, could only nod. The chair, a symbol of authority she'd fiercely striven to reclaim, now felt like an unexpected boon. Before Maria could fully process the gesture, Sarah enveloped her in a spontaneous, friendly embrace, smelling faintly of citrus and fresh linen. Maria, surprised but not unwelcoming, returned the hug, feeling the authentic warmth radiating from Sarah. It was a connection forged not in protocol, but in shared respect and an unexpected act of kindness. Maria settled into the large, comfortable chair. Its leather still held a faint warmth from Sarah's recent occupancy, a comforting echo of their brief, impactful exchange. As she sat, a profound sense of serenity enveloped her. The glow within intensified, spreading through her chest like a rising sun. It was a revelation, clear as the morning light streaming through the panoramic window. Genuine kindness, unburdened by ego or expectation, was indeed the most powerful way to lead, to connect, to simply exist. The path ahead, while undoubtedly fraught with challenges, now felt profoundly right.